According to the Gnostics, humanity is not one species, it is three, and most people belong to the type that will never wake up, not because they are incapable, but because they were designed that way, built to consume, to obey, to never ask questions that shatter the illusion. But if you are watching this right now, if something pulled you here, the Gnostics would say, you are not one of them, and that makes you dangerous. When the farmer discovered those ancient jars beneath the Egyptian desert in 1945, buried for over 1,600 years, he had no idea what he had uncovered. Inside those sealed clay vessels lay the Nag Hammadi text, fragments of a world, view so radical that empires worked for centuries to destroy every trace of it. And among the most unsettling revelations hidden in those pages was this: not all humans are the same. According to the Gnostics, humanity exists in three distinct categories, three types of consciousness, three levels of spiritual potential. And the disturbing part is this: only one of those types has any real chance of escaping the prison of this reality. The Gnostics did not speak in terms of race, or class, or intelligence. They spoke in terms of essence of what animates you from within. They called these three types the helix, the psychics, and the pneumatics, and each one operates at a completely different frequency of awareness. Most people have never heard these terms. Most will go their entire lives without ever questioning which category they belong to. But once you understand what the Gnostics were really saying, once you see the pattern you cannot unsee it, you begin to recognize these three types everywhere in your workplace, in your family, in the crowds that fill the streets, and you begin to understand why the world functions the way it does. Let us start with the first type, the helix. The word comes from the Greek word hyle, which means matter. The helix are those whose entire existence is rooted in the material world. They are not evil. They are not less than human. But according to the Gnostics, they lack the divine spark. They do not possess pneuma, the spirit that connects a soul to the higher realms. The helix live entirely through their senses, through appetite, through instinct, through the immediate gratification of physical desires. They are not reflective. They do not ask why. They simply exist within the flow of matter, consuming, reproducing, surviving, and then returning to dust. The Gnostics would say that the helix are like automatons, not robots in the literal sense, but beings who move through life without ever truly waking up. They follow trends without questioning. They accept authority without resistance. They chase pleasure and avoid pain, but they never stop to ask what lies beyond the surface. For them, this world is all there is, and they are content with that. They do not feel the pull toward transcendence, because there is nothing inside them reaching for it. The demiurge, the false creator, designed them this way. They are the workers, the consumers, the foundation upon which the material system rests, and they will never rebel, because rebellion requires a spark they do not carry. This is not a judgment. It is simply the Gnostic observation of reality. The helix are necessary for the system to function. Without them, the machinery of the material world would collapse. They build the cities. They staff the factories. They fill the roles. That keeps society moving. And they do so without ever wondering if there is something more. In Gnostic cosmology, the helix are the creation of the archons, not of the true source. They are beings of flesh animated by instinct, but they do not house the fragment eternity that defines the higher types. Now, here's where it becomes more complex, because the second type, the psychics, appear to be awake. They seem spiritual. They believe in God. They practice religion. They talk about morality and ethics and higher purposes. But according to the Gnostics, the psychics are still trapped. The word psychic comes from psyche, meaning soul. The psychics possess a soul. They have an inner life. They experience guilt, hope, fear, and longing. They are capable of reflection. They ask questions, but their questions never go deep enough. They accept the answers given to them by external authorities, by priests, by scriptures, by traditions, by the structures that the demiurge himself has established. The psychics are believers. They follow the rules. They attend services. They recite prayers. They think they are worshiping the true God, but in reality, they are worshiping the demiurge. They are caught in the web of organized religion, convinced that obedience will save them. And the tragedy is that their obedience keeps them bound. The psychics are not asleep like the helix, but they are dreaming. They mistake the dream for awakening. They mistake the false light for the true source. They have the capacity for gnosis, for direct inner knowing, but they have outsourced their spirituality. They have given their power to intermediaries, to priests who claim to speak for God, to books that claim to contain the final truth. And so they remain in the cycle, reincarnating, returning, believing that one more lifetime of devotion will finally grant them salvation. The Gnostics saw the psychics as tragic figures. They are so close to freedom, yet so far. They have the divine spark within them, but it is buried beneath layers of programming, beneath belief systems that were designed by the archons to keep them dazzled. The psychics will argue for their chains. They will defend the very institutions that imprison them, and they will look at those who question those institutions with suspicion, with fear, even with hatred, because to question the structure is to threaten their entire sense of identity, and that is something the psychic mind cannot tolerate. But then there is a third type, the pneumatics, and this is where everything shifts. The word pneumatic comes from pneuma, meaning spirit or breath. The pneumatics are those who carry the fullest expression of the divine spark. They are not just animated by soul, they are animated by spirit, by the same substance that flows from the pleioma, the realm of true light beyond the reach of the demiurge. The pneumatics are rare. They always have been. Throughout history, they have been the mystics, the heretics, the seekers who could not accept the answers they were given. They are the ones who feel a deep, unshakable knowing that something is wrong with this world, that the stories do not add up, that the authorities are lying, that there is a truth hidden beneath the surface, and they will not rest until they find it. The pneumatics do not fit into the system. They try. Many of them spend years trying to belong, trying to believe what they are told to believe, trying to find meaning in the structures that satisfy everyone else. But it never works. There's always a friction, a sense of displacement, a feeling that they're living in a world that was not designed for them. And eventually they stop trying to fit in. They turn inward. They begin to search for gnosis, for direct, unmediated knowledge of the divine. And once they taste that knowledge, once they experience even a glimpse of the truth beyond the veil, there's no going back. The Gnostics believe that the pneumatics are the greatest threat to the demiurge because the pneumatics cannot be controlled. You cannot bribe them with pleasure like you can the helix. You cannot pacify them with religion like you can the psychics. They see through the illusions. They recognize the archons for what they are. They understand that this world is a counterfeit, a shadow of something infinitely greater. And they refuse to bow to the false god who claims dominion over it. This is why the pneumatics have always been persecuted. This is why the Gnostics themselves were hunted, their texts burned, their teachers silenced. Because a world full of awakened, Pneumatics is a world where the demiurge loses his power. So how do you know which type you are? The Gnostics would say that if you are asking the question, you are already not a hill. The Helix do not wonder about such things. They do not watch videos like this. They do not seek hidden knowledge. They are content with the surface. So the question is really between psychic and pneumatic, and the distinction is subtle but crucial. The psychic seeks answers outside themselves. They look to teachers, to books, to systems. They want someone to tell them what is true. The pneumatic, on the other hand, knows that the truth cannot be given. It can only be remembered. It can only be experienced directly in the silence of their own awareness. If you have spent your life feeling like an outsider, if you have questioned everything, even when it cost you, relationships, even when it isolated you, the Gnostics would say that is the mark of the pneumatic. If you have ever felt a pull towards something you cannot name, a longing for a home you have never seen, that is the divine spark calling you back to the pleroma. If you have ever looked at the world and thought, this cannot be all there is, you are hearing the whisper of your true origin. And the more you listen to that whisper, the more the illusion begins to crack. But here is the challenge. The world is designed to suppress the pneumatic. Every system, every institution, every distraction is engineered to keep you from turning inward, to keep you busy, to keep you afraid, to keep you doubting your own. Knowing the archons understand that the pneumatic is the only real threat. So they work tirelessly to bury the spark beneath layers of conditioning. They flood your mind with noise. They offer you endless entertainment, endless conflict, endless reasons to look outward instead of inward. And for many pneumatics, the spark remains dormant for an entire lifetime. They feel the friction, but they never understand why. They sense the wrongness, but they never find the source. This is why the Gnostics emphasize gnosis above all else. Not faith, not obedience, but direct, experiential knowledge. The kind of knowledge that cannot be taught, only awakened. The kind of knowledge that dissolves the prison the moment you truly see it. Because the prison is not made of matter. It is made of belief. It is made of the stories you have been told about who you are, where you came from, and what you're supposed to do. And the moment you stop believing those stories, the moment you turn your attention inward and touch the spark that the demiurge cannot reach, the walls begin to crumble. The Gnostics did not see the three types as a hierarchy of worth. They saw them as a map of spiritual development. The Helic is trapped in matter. The psychic is caught in belief. The pneumatic is awakening to truth. And while the Gnostics believed that not everyone carries the same potential, they also believe that the potential within the pneumatic is infinite, because the pneumatic is not just human. They are a fragment of the eternal, a child of the true source, a being who was never meant to be imprisoned in the first place. Now, here is the part that disturbs people, because if the Gnostics are right, if there really are three types, then what does that mean for the Helix? What does it mean for the psychics? Can they change? Can a Helic become a psychic? Can a psychic become a pneumatic? The texts are not entirely clear on this. Some Gnostic schools believe that the types were fixed, determined at the moment of creation. Others believe that the spark could be awakened in anyone, given the right conditions. But what they all agreed on was this: the majority will never awaken. Not because they cannot, but because they will not, because awakening requires something most people are unwilling to do. It requires letting go of everything you've been told. It requires facing the void. It requires standing alone. And most people would rather stay asleep than face that kind of solitude. Most people would rather cling to the comfort of the known, even if the known is a lie, than step into the unknown in search of truth. This is not weakness. It is simply the nature of the system. The demiurge has built a world where awakening is the hardest path, where every force pushes you back towards sleep, where comfort, distraction, fear, and social pressure all conspire to keep the spark buried. And for the Hillock, there is no spark to bury. They are at peace in the material world because they belong to it completely. But if you are watching this, if you have made it this far, the Gnostics would say you are not a Hillock. You might be a psychic on the edge of awakening. You might be a pneumatic who has forgotten but is beginning to remember. Either way, something inside you is stirring. Something is pulling you toward the truth. And that pull is not random. It is a divine spark, recognizing itself. It is the fragment of eternity inside you calling out to the source from which it came. And once that call begins, it does not stop. It only grows louder. So what do you do with this knowledge? How do you move from psychic to pneumatic? How do you awaken the spark? The Gnostics would say it begins with silence, with turning off the noise, with stepping away from the authorities, the scriptures, the teachers who claim to have the answers. It begins with sitting in stillness and asking, who am I beyond the roles I play? Who am I beyond the name I was given? Who am I beyond the body, beyond the thoughts, beyond the stories? And in that silence, if you listen deeply enough, you will hear the answer. Not in words, but in presence. Not as information, but as recognition. You will remember what you have always known, that you are not of this world, that you are a spark of the eternal, temporarily housed in flesh, but never truly bound by it. And when that remembering happens, when the Gnosis awakens, everything changes. You stop seeking salvation from the outside. You stop waiting for permission. You stop fearing death because you recognize that death is just another illusion of the demiurge. You see the archons for what they are, not all powerful gods, but parasites feeding on ignorance. And the moment you stop feeding them, the moment you withdraw your energy from fear and distraction and false belief, their power over you dissolves because they were never real. They were only ever as real as you believe them to be. So, which type are you? If you have made it to the end of this video, if these words resonated somewhere deep inside you, then you already know the answer. The Helix never question. The psychics rarely dig this deep, but the pneumatics, they recognize the truth when they hear it, not because someone told them it was true, but because something inside them remembers. And that remembering is the first step toward freedom. The Gnostics left these teachings hidden for a reason. They knew that one day those who carried the spark would find them. And when they did, the awakening would begin. If this exploration into Gnostic wisdom opened something within you, then you are part of a rare group of seekers who refuse to accept the surface answers. The journey does not end here. There are deeper mysteries waiting to be uncovered, ancient truths that the archons worked for centuries to bury. Make sure you subscribe to the Gnostic Eye so you never miss the next revelation. Hit that like button if this video resonated with your inner knowing, and drop a comment below. Tell me which type you believe you are and whether you have felt the pull of the divine spark calling you home, because every awakened soul strengthens a collective light, and the demiurge fears nothing more than